experts. I should also let you know that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the CASA YouTube page, and it can be accessed in the next couple of weeks. If you have any questions, please pop them in the chat as we have our conversation. It's going to be very casual, a bit of a fireside chat, talking to our subject matter experts and guests, and we'll get to them. We'll also leave a few minutes at the end if you have any questions as well. So each August, CASA celebrates BeGrainSafe Week to raise awareness about the dangers associated with grain handling, grain storage, and more. BeGrainSafe Week is part of CASA's overall BeGrainSafe program, working to prevent grain-related incidents. And at the heart of this program is the firefighter training program and the BeGrainSafe mobile demonstration unit, which we call the trailer. And you might have seen that as you saw the PowerPoint when you came into the room. That trailer travels the country visiting fire departments from the Maritimes to BC. And CASA has a cohort of talented and passionate master trainers that help to work build communities' knowledge and awareness about grain entrapments and engulfments. And of course, the BeGrainSafe program, and indeed all CASA programming, would not be possible without the generous support of sponsors and donors. And we thank each and every one of them for their dedication and help. You can see those sponsors and donors on our website. And if you happen to see them and want to try about BeGrainSafe, maybe give them a thanks for us. We really appreciate their dedication and support. Without them, this absolutely would not be possible. I'd like to get started by introducing our guests today and just thank them both for being here and for sharing their insight, experience, and knowledge. Dan Marsellus is the Rural Fire Chief for Kneehill County and Deputy Director of Emergency Management in Alberta and a BeGrainSafe Master Trainer. Dan has been involved with the BeGrainSafe program since 2017 and has taught close to 200 first responders on the importance of grain safety in the last 2 years. Thank you, Dan. That is some impressive numbers. That is amazing. And Dan has been dedicated to service his entire career, not only in fire service, but in technical rescue, search and rescue, and has served in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thanks so much, Dan. We're so glad you could be here with us today.
Thank you.
I'd also like to welcome and introduce Catherine Rylatt, joining us from the Fort Worth area of Texas, where it is very hot. So we have to acknowledge that Catherine is just a fantastic person, and we're so happy that you could join us today, Catherine. And Catherine is the co-founder, and vice president of the Grain Handling Safety Council. Catherine founded the Grain Handling Safety Council after the grain engulfment death of her 19-year-old nephew and his 14-year-old co-worker. Catherine has put her experience and passion in forming and growing the council. Not only does Catherine volunteer her time running the day-to-day operations of the council, she's also the lead grant writer and coordinator ensuring program objectives are met. Catherine also serves on the Stand Up for Grain Safety Week Planning Committee, handling administrative and learning sessions. Stand Up for Grain Safety Week happens in the United States each March, and in 2025, it'll be March 24th to the 28th. I've had the privilege and pleasure of meeting Catherine in person a number of times, and her knowledge, expertise, and passion is so evident. And so thank you so much, Catherine, for you being here today. We appreciate you so much. So thank you both. We're just really excited to have you both here. And I guess we can get started. And my first question for both of you is kind of a little, give me kind of an easy one, but it kind of talks about the passion and the importance of grain safety. So from your perspective, maybe Dan, we'll start with you. Why do you think why is it important to understand grain safety, and why is it important to talk about it from your perspective?
Well, thanks, Robin. One of the things we find in our fire service world is we're reactionary. We're trying to get to the forefront of that and be precautionary or be ready for things. So as incidents happen, my training in 2017 came about as the result of 3 young ladies losing their lives near Eckville, Alberta. So with that, our director at the time, Dave Brand, I'll give a shout out to him, set it up that we could have a trailer. We did training, and then I got my master trainer from that point. Too often it's left on the side when it comes to safety. It's like we're trying to get things done. Harvest happens. We need to get it in the bin. We need to get the money. We need to get on that. We focus just on what's in front of us. And in the not military, but also in the fire world, we call that tactical fog. We start to focus on everything too close, and we don't look at the big safety picture. So if we take that step back and look at things bigger, that's where it becomes the important part of, okay, had I taken this time, had I taken this to have a phone call, or had I had this safety plan, all this becomes the preemptive stuff that saves us from going. It's not that I'm trying to unemploy fire departments. I'm just trying to make it the point that we are a secondary thing. So a lot of things happen before we get there. And the more safety in that can be done at the farm, and that is even better to happen for us to get there and make it an easy rescue instead of a recovery.
I love that you said that, Danny. You're not trying to put firefighters like out of get rid of fire departments and put them out of work. I always joke that I would really rather not have a job working in farm safety. That all farms were just completely safe, and I could do something else. Absolutely. So I totally respect that. Catherine, I'm going to throw that question to you. Why do you think it's important to understand grain safety, and why is it important to talk about it?
Well, yeah, hello everybody. Thank you, Robin. And I echo Dan. We are very reactionary. We don't, you know, we get busy and we don't think about the precaution, like Dan said. But I think the other thing is, we kind of live in a world where we don't always want to admit our mistakes either. So it is probably pretty true that there's a lot more entrapments that happen where maybe the person can get out on their own and they don't have to call rescue services or anything. And, when we don't talk about that, when we aren't, we don't look at it and say, how can we prevent this from happening? We're insulating ourselves, where if we talk about it more and we say, hey, yeah, that really did happen to me or happened on our farm, it brings that conversation out in the open, and we can talk about it more and be more aware of it, and work together more, because when you're working on a farm, a lot of times when you are working alone, you don't think to ask somebody for help, have somebody come and watch you while you're getting into the bin or whatever. So I think it's just, and I think there's an acceptance. um we all know, and even in the United States, agriculture is one of the most hazardous occupations. And we just tend to accept that instead of saying, how do we lessen those risks or mitigate those risks? Because most of the risks that are involved in the things that happen can be mitigated and can be prevented. And I think we've kind of gotten into this mindset, a little bit of complacency, where it's dangerous, so we're just going to accept that risk, and we're not going to think proactively of how we can actively avoid that risk every day. Because like Dan said, we get busy, we all get busy, and it doesn't matter if you're farming or you're trying to fix the roof of your house at home. You take shortcuts, and so we
Yeah.
just to learn not to do that.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're talking about fatalism and the idea that, it's not just predestined that, someone's going to get hurt or injured, handling grain, farming, that sort of thing, that there are preventative measures that we can take. There are things we can do to mitigate risks and hazards, even though, farming tends to be a hazardous occupation. So I really appreciate that perspective, Catherine. Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
really interesting. Something that came up just recently that CASA actually got a little bit involved in is, I don't know if anybody watches The Amazing Race, but The Amazing Race Canada had an episode where the contestants were asked to dig through a grain wagon, a wagon full of grain, to find a hidden object. And of course, CASA did a reach out to the producers, and just was like, I know we understand that these are done in controlled environments, yada yada yada. That this, but this is definitely portraying an unsafe action or behavior that could lead to potentially someone getting injured or engulfed or or killed. And it didn't really feel respectful of the hazards and dangers of that are involved with grain. So why do you think that maybe grain safety handling doesn't always get the respect that it deserves? Dan, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it still hinges on that message of complacency. We get busy in our work, we get going on things, need to move product to market, or there's such a small operation that they don't have the funds to put into a lot of safety. They may look at it, smaller operations, and I'm not going to shine the light too much on them because they might be more safe when they have check-ins and all that, but they still have complacency of like, oh, I'm just going to take care of this. I'll just quickly go in the bin and I'll check this because it's one thing I wanted to look at. Didn't see the bridge above them, didn't see the stuff on the side, and that decided at that moment to come down, they're out. There's no plan, there's no anything to say I'm going to contact. So with that, it may be the not full knowledge of the safety. So that's where organizations like yourself, Rob, with CASA, where you start seeing those kind of messages to put forward. Think of the safety on the farm and all this. Everybody still wants to sit down to dinner at the end of the day and have dinner in the field when you're doing the big operations and all that. Be wise and just have a point of contact. That's one thing that will start how we get going. If you're going to go do something, take care of a point of contact right away. If it's a truck driver in the field, I'm just going to check the box, make sure everything's clear. Along comes the grain cart, didn't know he's in there, dumps the grain in. We've got an incident right there and then. So yeah, it's that 1 minute. If it's a little radio in the field or a little hand, everybody's got cell phones, they got texting capability, stepping in the box truck, don't unload, wait till I'm out, going in the bin, not coming out. If I don't come out in 5 minutes or 10 minutes, ideally sit it low at 5 minutes because 3 to 5 minutes is our first aid margin. So let's look at that. That's pretty much what I can say about that. Rob or Catherine, how about you?
I kind of the same thing again, Dan, and you hit the nail on the head. We just get busy and we forget. And I think because and you've said this before, a grain fatality and engulfment in Canada, and it's a little bit more prevalent in the United States, but that fatality, it's low. What did you say? Low frequency, high fatality rate.
Yeah, low risk, high or low frequency, high risk.
Yeah, and because of that, I think it's just kind of human nature. You don't really always think about those risks then, because you get into that. It's not going to happen to me. I've done it hundreds of times or whatever. And it is always reminding yourself and always putting that out in the forefront that, no matter what you're doing, there's still a risk. I think, a lot of times we don't think, especially in smaller environments, some of the things we found is those things that commercial companies do, lockout, tag out, some of those preventative measures you think are too hard to implement, and they're really not. They're very easy, and they're, ways to be safe. And I appreciate that you brought up that you saw this on the Canadian TV show, Robin, that they kind of use grain in an unsafe way. I think that's the other thing we tend to we're surrounded by kind of conflicting messages, whether it's having a grain area for kids to play in on a farm, so they're like a sandbox, but it's grain, or a grain bin they've made into a fun space. Or even, if you watch, I like to watch HGTV and all the home improvement shows because I think I'm gonna, do something great one of these days. But even the other day, I noticed that they had people on, ladders during a storm, and they were putting up a steel pergola. And I was like, why did they think that this was okay to film and put out there? So I think those conflicting messages makes us, sometimes not take things as seriously as we should.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point. Catherine, Karen put in the chat, it makes her wonder about the competence of the safety advisor for that TV show. And, when we did reach out to, the producers, we said, CASA is here. We're here if you have any questions about farm safety or, portraying farm safety or, farming in a safe or unsafe manner. But, it's absolutely a good point. We've had this conversation at farm shows and things like that, where, they'll have, a kids play area, which is a great idea. But of course, then it's great, right? That the kids are playing in, and that idea that, just that optics and that messaging is, well, we talk so much about, this grain being an unsafe place to play, an unsafe place for, unqualified people to be. And then all of a sudden we're putting, small children into a situation where it is managed at that point, but it's not managed everywhere.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
And
So that's,
People don't always have the ability, or I don't want to say ability, but especially if you're in an environment where you're playing with it one day, and a few years later you're supposed to be working in it, and nobody's taught you that that's safe, that's not going to cross your mind. That's, you aren't going to make that connection. And I think too, as obviously, because my nephew was younger, when you do have younger workers on the farm, and I'm saying anybody, from 26 down, and the reason I say 26 is your brain is not fully developed, especially the male brain, until they're 25. And when I say that, it's that reasoning capacity and that ability to make good decisions, and kind of think through all the consequences of your decisions. And we tend to forget that, and we put kids in these environments and we say, oh, well, they know what to do. Well, no, a lot of times they don't. And they're also more into that, well, nothing's going to happen to me, and I'm going to take this risk because I'm macho, and I'm going to do a good job because I want to make my employer happy, or whatever the reason. And that can lead to decisions that are not good and put them at higher risk. And I think that's something that we really need to keep in mind. I know that I have a 27-year-old son. Well, actually just turned 28. But I remember, they changed a lot of the driver's license, schooling and stuff from when I was in school a long time ago. And a lot of that was based on the whole premise that teens don't, they don't always have the reasoning capacity. So, like, you can't have a carload of kids anymore. You have to be a little bit more safe. So we have to think about that in our work environments too.
Yeah, I really respect that. And that's really good points about children and young workers and learning. And, there are some really great resources out there, if you are trying to introduce, farming activities to children. And there's the Agricultural Youth Work Guidelines, which are available on the CASA website, to the National Farm Medicine Center out of the United States, which are just excellent if you're starting to introduce young folks to that. So I know we talked a little bit about those risky behaviors just now. So, maybe Dan, I'm going to throw this back to you. What are some risky behaviors that you know about or have seen? And what are the consequences of those kind of behaviors around grain?
Some, like, it doesn't seem like one, but sometimes people want respite. They'll just step back and sit in the bin, not realizing what hazards inside the bin. I had a recent conversation with a friend of mine. He said he went in there and he looked up, and after all the work was done, he saw the overhanging grain that was stuck to the side of the bin that didn't even come to his mind to look up as they're sweeping the floor and all that. Most ones are hopper bottom now, so you don't have as many people in. Most big organizations have doors that they don't let people in the bins. They're using a lot of controls and that, so that mitigates that risky behavior. Some's in the field when they're starting to move grain and do all that. If you're at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you're still got your head about you, but you're 3 o'clock in the morning as you're still trying to fight the dew to try to get things in and off the field. Your clarity factor, if you were up at 8 o'clock that morning, your clarity factor is way off, and you're going to have an issue trying to keep your head focused and focusing on safety. Those are the two that I really see. There's more out there, but those are the two I really see.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dan. I'm going to just pop in the chat. It's a link to an image that CASA has about how folks can get caught bridge grain, flowing grain, and grain avalanches. And that grain avalanche is the one you just mentioned. So, yeah, definitely those are ways people get entrapped. Catherine, I'm going to throw that question over to you.
Oh gosh, there's so many risky behaviors, and again, it's because people either don't understand it or didn't take the time. I like what Dan said, people just sit down. And the fatigue, of course, one of them, especially during harvest. But again, the little things, lock out, take out all the equipment before you go inside. A lot of times, and we know this happens, it happens frequently in the United States, you know, the grain is plugged, it's not flowing. And, you know, so, you know, you leave the equipment running and you go in there with a, you know, pole or something and you're, you know, trying to unplug it. Well, once that happens, then that grain flows very fast and you're going to get caught in it. You know, so just being aware, locking out and taking out your equipment is going to keep that grain from flowing. And along with what Dan said, you know, a lot of people will say, well, stay on the outer rim, you know, stay away from the middle. But as grain flows and as gravity is getting it to flow, those sides are going to be caving in. So, you know, you're going to have less and less space to stand. I'm kind of looking at my notes here. Um, I know that, you know, you know, trying to unplug the sump is one thing. Just anything, we call it walking down the grain. You know, 'cause sometimes people are actually in the bin and they're, you know, using shovels or whatever to try and break up the clumps. Anything like that, especially if your sump gates are open or your equipment is running, is very, very risky. I think, um, you know, not not appreciating the risk and not having proper training is something. Um, and what Dan said too is not like looking up, always staying above the grain. So if you have grain that's on the side, I don't think people appreciate that a little bit of grain falling can knock you over. And if, you know, you're on your knees or, you know, you fall on your stomach or you fall on your back or whatever, and that grain comes down on top of you, it's heavy and you may not be able to get yourself out, even though it was only a little bit or what you perceived as a little bit of grain. And there was a death of a worker here who went in there. There was some grain hanging up on the sides. He was trying to finish cleaning out the bin, so he was just knocking it down. He was by himself. It was during a lunch hour. He was in that, you know, I want to get this done and get this cleared out because we have to load some more grain in here. And he knocked a clump down, and that's exactly what happened. It knocked him down and it engulfed him, and it was only a few feet of grain, you know. And so it, you know, just kind of be aware of that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Catherine. That, you know, even though the perceived risk might seem like it's not low, it's low, it could actually be a fairly high risk situation. So having that good, you know, not having that brain fog and, you know, making good decisions and having, you know, we do have a grain bin entry form that actually I think we based off of yours and a video that folks can use to maybe make those rational decisions. Because, you know, when we're looking at harvest time and it's so busy, right, you're just trying to get that crop off, like Dan
Right.
mentioned. You know, we're not always maybe making the best decisions because we are in a rush. Maybe we haven't had enough sleep. We know that not having enough sleep is a huge detriment to safety
Right.
and to our mental health, both. You know, not good nutrition or not drink, even something as drinking as much as drinking enough water can really make, you know, lead us to making poor decisions. So, you know, those are interesting. I think a lot of times humans think that we are bigger than our biology, right? Like we can just outthink and outwork our biology, but it's, you know, we still need water, we still need sleep, we still need food, right? And when we
Right.
ignore those like biological needs, sometimes it leads to bad decision making. So that's a
I
yeah,
think that's
interesting.
a really good point, especially the water. Like we don't, you know, I've noticed that. And especially as you get older. I'm going to say this because I am older. You know, I realize I don't drink as much as maybe I should in terms of water. You're also tend to be on more medications, you know. So if you're working on the farm, think about those medications. You know, they put those warning labels on your medication jar for a reason. You know, it can cause you to be tired. It can cause you to maybe move a little bit slower, even just physically. You know, as you get older, you may not have the strength you used to have. I know that, you know, I've noticed that, you know, we're trying to do some home repairs, and what we used to be able to heft up and hold and everything, it's, you know, not as easy. So all of those things that we don't want to think about, but like Robin said, are kind of, we are human, we are not machines, and we have to think about those, and even weather. I mean, we know you're trying to get the crops in. I remember I was doing some volunteer work. This was a long time ago, and one of the persons on the group with me was a farmer, and I would go out and find him in the field at 10 or 11 o'clock at night. If I needed to reach him and there was a particular thing going on, I really needed to find him. And, I'm like, and I know he was up at like 4 in the morning. And I'm like, what are you still doing out here? He has lights on and he's trying to bring his crop in. And, that's just
Yeah, and
crazy.
that fatigue level, right? And that's like, you are incapacitated, right? Like, absolutely. So, and it's interesting you talk about aging, and it's true. In Canada, United States, we both have a trend of seeing, the average age of farmers is increasing. I think it's 56 in Canada now. So, those conversations about medication and just competency levels, abilities, those sorts of things, and we do have there's also a resource out on the website about a job safety analysis if anyone's interested as we get older, or even as we try to get into maybe different lines of working on the farm. There's that available as well. So I think we've kind of talked a little bit about this, but I want to throw this back again at you, Dan. Is what are the biggest hazards in relation to grain handling that you think people should be aware of? Is there anything that, like, I know we talked about those 2 points. Is there anything that overall that really just stands out as like one of the biggest hazards?
One of the biggest ones I see that will get called for a lot is the movement of grain, whether it be the movement in the vehicles, movement from even just harvesting. If we're getting in front of that combine, we're getting in front of the machines that are doing the work. That's a danger. As it comes out of it into the grain carts, we're seeing larger augers and all that, so it's moving more grain. We're starting, as we talked in our pre-stuff, we've got some conveyor belts out there too, which can really move some heavy capacity. So as we start to see more and more of that, people still have that old mentality of, okay, I can still get in there, I can do that. And as Catherine said there, with that sump open or the bottom hoppers open, our prop is pretty good because we have a spot where you can stand and you're not going to get pulled into the drawworks of that auger. When you have one on the farm, there's no protection. Or they might have been removed because you wanted more grain to go through, just because some people look for ways for efficiency. So they start taking some safety precautions and safety measures out of the vehicles and the equipment to just get that more a little bit through. When it comes to the movement of it, it's not just putting it into the trucks. It's moving the trucks to the granaries, to the terminals. As you're coming in late at night, as you're coming in during the day, the traffic congestion of them. As you get to the terminals, the rail movement, filling the rail cars, all that. There's the bigger the thing, the more higher potential for damage and a higher potential for people to get hurt. Yeah, those are the biggest ones that I see for the hazards. Some of the surprising things. Just doing the grain training as we're bringing the firefighters. I know it's a question got coming up here, but when the firefighter stands in there and we open that bottom up, all the literature in that we have in the online course talks about the movement of grain and no buoyancy. So when they feel that for the first time, their eyes go from these little pee holes to these great big plate size, and down they go. We're tied into safety. We've got all that. But as Catherine mentioned, as you're working around the edges, that outside edge flows in and then it keeps flowing from the side down into that center and that cone into that hopper bottom or whatever you got in the middle that's moving your grain. You're going for a ride and that's your destination. Even if the box is lifting up and the dump point's here, you're heading towards that. So there's a lot of things that with that movement of grain, you really have to focus on and have the clarity to make sure the operator knows what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Dan, I have a question. You're talking about, moving like grain in trucks and, moving combines field to field. Do you folks see a market increase of, road incidents during seeding and harvest when there is a lot more movement on the roads?
Fortunately, in the county I work in, no, we don't. We've got people are fairly level-headed. They'll not move anything, go into the farms. We don't see anything. But in the past, we did have some. Not here, where the other organization I belong to, I was part of the Delburn Fire Department, and they had some where some tragic accident happened from trucks and that. So I'm seeing less, but I'm not saying they're gone. I just haven't seen any in the 5 years I've been here.
I love that. That's great. I'm glad we haven't seen any in 5 years. That means things are working, right? Lighting, folks are understanding, between traffic, like regular traffic, and then equipment operators, understanding each other and having a little more respect for those sorts of things. So that's really good news. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah, Catherine, I'm gonna over to you.
Um, Trying to remember the question. Obviously, Rob, I was really
No,
listening.
that's okay. I know Dan was really interesting. What are some what are some of the biggest hazards in relation to grain handling? I know we talked about a few things like walking down that grain, those sorts of things, but is there anything surprising or like that maybe people don't know about that maybe like I know we talked about lockout, tag out, and we've even kind of talked a little bit, kind of hinted on that entanglement stuff, with the augers and things like that.
I think I'm going to build on what Dan said and give you a little quick thing. As he said, that flowing, whenever grain moves, it's not good. Um, you know, it is like quicksand. So if you move, it's going to flow and try and fill up whatever gaps are around, which is why it becomes like hard to breathe, because when you breathe out, you're breathing out, but when you breathe in, then it's going to fill in that little gap. But the big thing is, as Dan mentioned, as our equipment is getting bigger, as your augers are getting bigger, as you're using the conveyor belts and everything, that speed of entrapment increases. So, if you were using a 6-inch auger or an 8-inch auger before, and now you're using a 10-inch one, and you're in there and the grain starts flowing and you get trapped, you can be totally engulfed in less than a minute. And if your fire department is luckily trained by Dan, but it's 10 minutes away by the time you call and they get out there, I mean, that, you know, you're playing with some fire there, because most people can't survive 10 minutes under grain. So I think it's just really being aware of that it's, as you're increasing your ability to produce, and you have larger bins on the farm, you have more equipment, get the training, use some, build in some real safety precautions. And I think the other thing that we're seeing a lot of in the United States is those sump holes in the, you know, that are in the bottom. This is usually when people are, trying to clean out the last of that grain. Make sure that, before you go in there, if there's a way to cover those up, that you do. Because what what we're finding with people is they're in there, they're walking around, they're sweeping the grain or whatever, they're getting caught in those sump holes, because you can't always see them. So your leg gets caught, and if you have the equipment running and your leg goes down into one of those sump holes, you are likely not going to come out in one piece, if you come out, because again, if it starts churning or whatever, it's just a very dangerous thing. So making sure the equipment's off, guarding the sump holes, um being aware of the traffic, like Dan said, just moving the grain in the traffic with the trucks, being aware of where people are at. All of those, we don't tend to think about it, but those are all really, really important things. So that would be what I would say is, people are getting more bigger bins on the farms, and making sure, that you know how to operate those. And the other thing that I know from experience, we went to do a training in a state, and they had just built this beautiful new system for grain. They had, like 3 or 4 big bins, and, they were very tall and everything. They had a catwalk, and they didn't put railings on the catwalk between them. And I just looked at them and I'm like, you're 60, 70 feet up in the air and you don't have railings? Well, because a lot of times those things don't come, like when you're ordering your bin setups and stuff, you have to specify, I want railings, I want this, I want that. So make sure if you're building new structures, you are asking your representative and putting in those safety features. Whether a lot of new bins now will have will be built with an anchor point on the top, so that when you are entering, you have a safe place to tie off to. Make sure you have the railings. Invest in the safety of the actual structure, and that'll help keep you safe while you're doing.
One thing,
That's
if I could add,
cool.
Robin,
Yeah, of course, please.
with one of the makeups we find too, with a lot of the green areas, a lot of the fire departments in those areas are volunteer. In Kneehill County, all my departments here are volunteers. Some of the counties around us have paid on call, which are basically volunteers that are paid a little better than the straight volunteers here with the hot dog and a hoodie. But the ones that are here increases our response time for all volunteers. They're coming from a job to respond to the hall, to get in the fire apparatus, to come out and help people. So we could have upwards of 20 minutes, 30 minutes before they get to your farm if somebody gets entrapped. So with that, a real big push needs to be for those larger operations to have something on site. When we talk about, or when I mentioned earlier about the 3 to 5 minutes, when you do any first aid course, 3 to 5 minutes with no oxygen to your brain, that's when things start to break down physically for you, and everything that goes sideways for you, if you're lucky to get out. The sad reality for most fire departments coming in is it's body recovery and not a rescue. So with that, there's weight too in the communities, because most volunteers that come to that scene may know that person that was trapped. You're going to find it in the rural fire service. You will have that one call where you know somebody. So that's something that's pretty heavy.
Right. Right. Somebody, I'm reading the chats, and this might be something you can help address too, Dan. Somebody said, I believe people are not fully aware of the crush pressure of grain.
I know when we train our guys and girls and everybody that attends the BeGrainSafe for the first responders, the online portion of the course goes into that crush pressure. It gives them the idea, like if you're caught to the knees, this is how much force you have. If you're caught to the waist, there's 900 pounds pressure. Depending on which grain it is, it varies. As soon as you're buried deeper than your waist, you cannot pull somebody out. You've got to take the grain away from that person to take them out. So that's the huge aspect and the huge difference that people don't understand. One of the things too, we train with the crush pressure, is changing the mindset. Some of the farmers that I've trained that are firefighters as well said, well, I'll just open the gate further and get the grain to flow faster. Stop the flow of grain. We can't impress that on people enough. Stop the flow of that grain. People stop where they're at. We've got a better chance of getting to them. If it's a small amount, I can see the logic behind it. But if it's a large amount, you're going to bury them further in. As they come into that funnel in the center, we've now got to dig down, and most of the cofferdams that we use to take the grain away are only about 5 foot tall. So now we've got to find different ways to put things together to get to the depth that this person's at. So we've got a lot of challenges that way. So the crush pressure, as you go deeper, that crush pressure increases, and that asphyxiation factor, as you breathe out, the grain fills in. You can't breathe in as much anymore, and it's to the point where it's now a fatality scene.
Right. Right. I think isn't it, Dan, and I should know this, and of course, when I get called on, it's like a test, you freeze. But I believe it's once it reaches your knees, you cannot self-extricate because of the weight of the grain. And so you got to remember that. Like, you can't get yourself out without some kind of help. And like Dan said, once it reaches your waist, if somebody just tries to yank you out, they might be yanking you in half or something. But yeah, that was a good comment in there. Um, and I'm sorry that I looked through I just like to look through the chat, but I
No,
want
please, no apologies. That's great. I was like, this is good, Catherine. I could just mute myself and you guys could have the chat because you guys are awesome. You guys are so super fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that those are really interesting points. And Dan, I appreciate you bringing up, that idea that we have to shut the flow of grain off, right? When someone gets entrapped, because we have heard that, even from, maybe folks that just, they're not aware. They're doing their best that they can, and they just don't know. Then they think, oh, if we just move this grain faster, we'll get them out quicker. But of course, that's not the case. And shutting off the flow of grain is always going to be your first step of if ever someone is, unfortunately engulfed or entrapped in grain. So that's a really good point.
It is a good question. I will tell you this. That is exactly what happened that caused my nephew to become engulfed. They thought that they could get the kids out by opening up the sumps and having, it flow. And all it did was bury them faster and, all of that. So I think I'm glad Dad mentioned that.
Yeah, and Catherine, we are just so sorry about your loss. That is incredibly tragic, and this is why we do what we do. At CASA, is to prevent that loss of life and those really bright futures being, unfortunately gone that like in the blink of an eye. So thank you for sharing those details. I know that's really tough. So, Dan, you did mention something that was interesting. The eyes get really big. They get to be saucers. Those firefighters when they get there, we will sink them in the grain trailer, but of course it is in a controlled environment. It's not very deep. It is very safe. It is a part of getting them to understand what it's like to be engulfed or entrapped, I should say, in grain. So, can you just maybe expand on some of the experiences that the firefighters go through when they go through the training, and how you go about with that training and what that looks like from your perspective, and kind of just a little overview of what you know about it and what you've experienced?
You betcha. So a typical day of training, we'll try to break it down to blocks. Some will sit there for a long time, some will sit there for a little time. We can only have maximum of 6 people comfortably on that deck for everybody to have a job to do and not be filling that upper deck with too many people. One person's going to be trapped. That's the way it works. 4 people are going to be rescuers, and then I'll have a 6th one up there to be the one that's going to be the gopher to hand things to the people inside the area. I'll step in the grain first with everything off and show them how quickly it is to sink inside it. Then we'll put down the milk crates or the bread pans or the snow fence or whatever we have to bring ourselves up so that we're above the grain. As you step in there, the firefighter, as they're brought down in, somebody will walk around them, and as they walk around, they'll feel the pressure of that grain pushing on them. It's not going to be a lot of pressure, but they understand that. So when they come in, it's an awareness for them, if they ever are involved in a grain rescue, that what they do has pressure implications inside the whole vessel that they're in.
Megan's just going to share a couple pictures as you talk about it, Dan. So you can keep going. Yeah.
So if we look at this, these photos actually were done in Trochu, Alberta here. It's my crew that I had out there. You can see how small that bin is in the middle. You can see the davit, the yellow arm there that's sticking out, that will have the person that is our quote unquote victim, the one that we put inside. I'll step in the middle, and you can see how confined it is up there. So having any more than 6 people on that deck is very tight and very hard to move. Now, I'll back things up a little bit. Before we go up on the trailer, I'll do a walk around of the trailer. Here's where the safety features are. Up top on the deck, we've got an ESD button that we can hit, kill all the power, and nothing works at that point. So if something goes wrong, we can stop everything there. Once the person's entrapped, there's no need for any power on the deck because everything else is done by what the firefighters bring to the top. If you look at that one photo there, the long red things there, that's part of the coffer dam that we put around the person. So when you look at the left photo, yeah, there we go. That left photo there shows the coffer dam put together, and the person's inside that. So that's how we take the grain away from that person, and then we can actually get them out of the grain. I've had people buried down to their neck. Again, we're very safe in what we're doing. We make sure there's not a lot of grain on them at that point. We don't often find a lot of them in this vertical environment. So the way we train here, they're very much vertical. When we put them on their sides and you can't close that cofferdam, I'll take some people to some advanced training in some of the scenarios and challenge them to make this work without a full cofferdam around them. Give them some real opportunities that they're actually going to see in a bin. They may not be able to bring this equipment in with them. What do they have to make work while they're there? It's nice having this. It's nice having all the equipment we have. But it's also giving them the tools and the toolbox and the mindset that this is something that you can improve on. A lot of their experiences that they say when they're there, I didn't know this is how grain moved. I didn't understand this is what happened. They come away with a huge appreciation for what actually goes on in there and the importance of the safety aspect of everybody there. So this one here, if you look at the right photo, there's actual, and the GSI rescue tube, that's this particular model, it has a ladder set up inside. So as we pull that grain away, the people can use that ladder to climb out. What it does for the person inside is it gives them a sense of security. So if you've got somebody is very claustrophobic because suddenly your world's turned into this little 2-foot tunnel or 4-foot tunnel, it's very tight, it's very small. So you're watching these people. With the firefighter training, we really work on the fact of any technical rescue we do or any vehicle rescue we do, once we make contact with the patient, we don't break it. We keep talking to them. We keep working with them. We keep them focused on us so that they know we're here to help. And that's one of the things we do is have them grab that side rail, have that one person talk to them all the time, and then they'll climb out on their own once the grain's far enough. We'll get them to move, and then they can come out. We had a few try to self-extricate. We had one person actually, he was buried to the waist, was able to do it, but the thrashing and the amount of exercise and all that he had to put into that, he was very exhausted at the end of it. So when you have the opportunity and the equipment's there, let the people help you. You are going to be exhausted because the first reaction of somebody getting sucked in is I want to swim and I want to get out, and you can't. So you're going to burn all your energy right away. And as you're into that more level coming here, and then when we don't see the patient anymore, I teach them a little bit of practice too of going in with like an avalanche probe kind of idea. We use show sticks on this one, but avalanche probes, where's the person at? Where can I find a leg? Where can I find? And we'll leave those in place so we can get an idea so we know where to put the tube and put it around the people that are on there. What you can see on the left photo here is you can see those little black spots. That's what helps us be levitated. These guys aren't practicing levitation. They're actually standing on those black pieces. They sink under the grain, but that gives us a chance to stay on top of the grain and focus our energies there. We're not going down. We're actually putting all our energy forward into getting these people out. So the experience and the knowledge, I've done a lot of training. I've only had a couple 7 out of 10 ratings. And the only reason that they said 7 out of 10 is we didn't go far enough. We didn't go into more rescue aspect. We didn't get very far. So when I look at, I've got a full day of 16 groups of 6, or yeah, that's pretty tight. So it's about 2 or 3 hours. So about 8 or 10 you can do, but it's tight. And when you have more groups, you don't have the time to throw the advanced scenario for these people to learn the harder and more technical aspects of what's there. For the most part, it's just basically the first group comes up and they fumble everything because they are not aware of what's going on. By the time you get to that 6th person, they're a well-oiled machine. They know what they're doing. They've got a battle rhythm with each other. They know who can do what, and the person's out very quickly. So that's some of the experiences are very high knowledge, and they're saying we'd like to do more. And every time we finish, we want to do more.
Isn't that great? Yeah. And you know, and you said something that is really important, I think, is, you know, this is a very ideal scenario where someone would be entrapped, right? Like you said, people don't always get entrapped standing straight up, right? Most times they don't, right? So there is those, you know, considerations that have to be talked about, you know, in terms of, you know, moving around, being, you know, kind of in a different position, or those sorts of things that might, you know, be a real life scenario. Heather made a really good comment here, is You can also get the bends like in diving when you try to fight your way free. Your body needs to equalize the pressure depending on the situation. And that's absolutely true. That's why we do encourage folks, if they've been entrapped, that they do go seek medical attention immediately, because there are those kind of symptoms and scenarios that can happen after being rescued from a grain entrapment. So yeah, good point, Heather. Appreciate that. Catherine, I was just wondering, what trends do you see emerging in grain handling safety? Are you seeing things come out? Are you hearing about things, maybe technology or training or information that's changing how we're approaching grain handling safety in the United States?
Yeah, there's a few things I want to comment on something Dan said because I really liked it. It the point of being in contact constantly with who's ever entrapped in that grain to try and keep them calm, even if you're, even while you're waiting for the rescue team, having somebody in contact with them, I think is really, really important. Try and keep them calm because you don't want them, fighting and digging themselves in more. In terms of trends, I think that, and there was a comment in chat that I was reading, um, if, again, it goes back to, if you are building a new bin, getting a new bin installed, look at the different options you can get. They are, a lot of the commercial establishments now have the grates are already in the floor to cover up the sump holes. They have no entry sweep augers, things like that. You may not, these are costly, so you may not be able to afford them, but definitely talk to your bin manufacturer about what you can have. For farms, if you're still looking at a smaller bin, stairs instead of ladders, they circle around the bin. They're easier as you get older and handrails on them. um uh One of the things that we didn't touch on this, but this is how our whole conversation with Robin got started about a month ago, was grain quality. And we all know that grain quality, it affects how often or if you have to go into your bin. So you want to store your grain in the best quality it can be, because once it's in the bin, you can't improve the quality. You can maintain it, but you can improve it. So before you even store anything, make sure that every year you're checking your structures thoroughly to make sure that there's no holes, the seals aren't broken, there's no damage to them. Making sure you're cleaning your storage and your equipment thoroughly, and getting rid of all of last year's stuff that probably has bugs in it, because the bugs are gonna infect your grain. And if it goes out of condition, that's when people tend to go into the grain bin. Um, you know, think about the extreme weather environments that you go through. Um, Obviously, right now I'm in Texas and it's 100, and last time I checked it was 102 here today. So whether it's heat, whether it's cold, whether it's flooding, whether it's drought, all of that needs to be, accounted for, and your practices need to adapt to that. And if you've had extreme flooding, have a structural engineer or somebody from the manufacturer, whatever, come out, check your bins to make sure that they're, still stable or whatever. Adapt your work practices. That's the one thing that's kind of the big thing in the United States right now, is the heat extremes in the summer, cold, like adapting our work practices. Soybean pods, we're doing a lot more soybean growing here because of biofuels. So if you are increasing your production of that, know that those pods can clump on the sides and, get your grain to go out of condition and clump your sump holes and all of that. So that'd be another thing. And then, instead of going into the bin, look at, seeing if there's something else you can do. Hire a reclaim specialist. You can call your Jeeps chapter. I gave you that information, Robin. If you don't know who to call, Jeeps is the the Grain Elevator and Processing Society. They're the education program for the commercial industry, but they have a lot of resources. I'm sure they'll be willing to help you with. And um, one of the one thing you can do is, after you fill your bins, to try and help keep that grain in good qualities, make sure you core them. And I'm sure y'all know what that is, but that's, you fill the bin, you take some out, because the fines will go to the middle. So you're coring your grain, you're taking some out and putting it back in. So those, and there's things like the Mole Master, and that's a whip that'll help knock down grain that's built up. There's another thing, I can't remember the name of it. And I will try and get it. Aaron's been working on it. It's like a submersible kind of thing that goes down and helps break up your grain. So there is new technology out there that you want to look at. There's also some really great technology that you can use if you're a lone worker, although we really don't recommend you working alone. We strongly advise you not to. But it's like an Apple Watch or something that can monitor your heart rate, that can monitor if you're falling. So it's all this new wearable tech, which, if you're older like me, you're like, oh my God, I can't figure out, that. But work with work with your kids and your grandkids, because this can be, very valuable in terms of sounding alarms if you're in trouble. So those are things that I would look into. And a lot of that wearable tech isn't that expensive. So a lot of the safety things you can do aren't that expensive. If you aren't regularly using lockout takeout on your farm, implement it. It's not that expensive. It's putting those good practices in place and making sure you have an emergency plan and everybody knows how to contact and who to contact if something happens. So those are the things I would suggest.
That was invaluable, Catherine. That was amazing. And I wish I needed to, I'm going to capture all of that in the recording, and we're going to write like 15 articles from just like that much information, because that was amazing. We're at the top of the hour. So I think we've pretty much run out of time, but I am going to just throw this back to both of you just for one last comment. And from your heart of hearts, Dan, is there anything you wish more people knew when it came to grain safety and grain entrapment?
Plant at home. Plant it at the farm first. Make sure you have everything you need before you get into the season. If you don't, make the plans to work with other farms that are larger, that may be your neighbors. Like I know how the rural communities work. Walk down the road to your neighbor. You have lunch, you have supper with everybody, but while you're there, talk with them, see what they're using, come up to speed on some of the newer tech and even the older stuff. How does it work for them? What are they doing? And just make sure that, look, if your family's not home, I'm home, give me a call. Have that point of contact if you are going to do anything. That's the big key messages I could push out for today. There's some good questions in the chat. I've seen a couple. We've already answered a few. I did see one there from, I think Darina was the name. And let me just find that one for a sec here. Sorry, fat fingers and trying to do tech here.
No worries. I think it was about
in-bin sensors.
Yeah.
I know for myself, I came from industry. We used in tank measures and all that for our system. The biggest thing with those is to make sure that they're working, make sure that they don't go out of spec. That's the main thing when you have stuff inside. The older the tech, the more it tends to fail. But if you can stay on top of it, that does turn into an extra cost. But when they work right, yeah, they do reduce the risk of needing to go inside. A lot of major grain facilities have these, and they don't allow people in because they use them. So it's nice to see that that technology is available and works.
Yeah, the best prevention is, is not getting entrapped in the first place, right? Is not having to go into those situations. So, preventing entry is always going to be the number one. All right, Catherine. I've last thought. What do you wish more people knew about grain safety and grain entrapment?
It is preventable. Like Dan said, don't do it alone. For the big thing, lockout, takeout, don't do it alone. Keep that grain in condition so you don't have to go and do everything you can to prevent having to go in. But if you have to go in, lockout, takeout, never alone. Have a buddy. I love what Dan said. Get with the people around you, get with your family, make a plan, have a plan, stick to the plan. Even if you want to take that shortcut to get it done a little bit faster, it is really not worth it.
Absolutely. Well, I would like to say thank you so much to both of you personally. This was amazing, and I've had the opportunity to talk to you a couple times now, and I'm just blown away by your passion, dedication, and knowledge to both of you. So thank you so much for your service to farmers, farm families, and farming communities in North America. So thank you. If for all of you folks out there, I want to thank you for spending an hour of your day with us as well. If you're interested in learning more about CASA or what CASA does, you can visit our website. Our AGM is upcoming. If you'd like to become a member, we'd love to have you as well. So check us out. Reach out to us. We'd love to chat. So thank you again, and we hope you have a very wonderful, safe, and a happy rest of your summer.
Thank you for inviting us, Robin.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you for this great chat. It's amazing.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.